Welcome to Season 4. In this season, I walk you through many life events that transform my view of reality. And today, I will speak about one of my closest friends. I carry this story because he never got the chance to tell his own. His life, his struggles, his small joys, and the quiet ways he tried to love. It all slipped into silence before the world ever heard him. I've held his memory close for years, not because I wanted to, but because I felt I had to. The way he moved through life, the way his presence still lingers, taught me that some stories press against your chest until you finally let them breathe. This is one of those stories. I knew one day I would speak about him, but I never knew when I'd be ready. I had to sit in the memories of him a little longer, replay the scenes, feel him through time and space. I didn't want to miss the smallest detail. So today, I will speak about someone whose death marked my journey in ways I never expected. More than anything else, his death transformed my view of reality as I knew it. For a long time, I kept running away from the very fact that he was truly gone. Where do I even begin? To tell his story, I have to go back to the moment I first heard about him. I was away in New York when word reached me that he was going to marry someone in my family. Even from a distance, the news felt like it carried weight, though I didn't yet know why. I met them not long after, in town, with his wife by his side. Their relationship was already known to be rocky. Family tension made it hard for him to be fully accepted. But what stood out to me, even then, was how she held on to him. It was the kind of loyalty you notice in silence. No matter who resisted him, she would not. In their young faces, I could see both love and struggle woven together, as if they were already fighting the world just to stand side by side. Looking back, they were still very much young adults, reaching for adulthood with hearts that hadn't yet fully healed from their pasts. But despite their struggles, one thing was undeniable. He loved her with a kind of loyalty that was rare. They clung to each other, inseparable, even when the world pressed hard against them. At the time, I didn't have the words for it, but I could sense how much effort he was making to push forward. Life, however, was unkind. Each small step forward seemed heavier than it should have been. I remember when they bought their first car. The way their faces lit up, you'd think they had been handed the whole world. It was a moment of pure happiness, a glimpse of the future they hoped for, a fresh start, a new beginning. From my perspective, looking back now, they still carried childlike minds in adult bodies. They laughed, they argued, they clung to each other in ways that felt more like adolescence than adulthood. The truth was, none of them had been given the tools to grow into stable adults. They were survivors trying to figure out life while already carrying too much weight. Their circle of friends reflected that same energy, chaotic, restless, reckless. I remember the shock of seeing their brand new car broken by someone in their own group. It was heartbreaking because that car wasn't just a vehicle. It was a symbol of hope, a small step toward building a life. And yet, even that was torn down by the very people they thought were walking beside them. I remember the first time I crossed into heavier substances. It was with them. Marijuana had already passed through my hands before, but this time was different. This time I stepped further, and they were right there beside me. It wasn't out of malice or intention. It was simply the way life pulled us all together in that season. I don't share this part to make him look bad. I share it because it's the truth. and I've outgrown the need to hide it. Back then, I didn't understand how much those choices were shaping the way we saw each other, the way we spoke, the way reality bent around us. I can only look back now with clearer eyes and understand it was what it was. Nobody could have rearranged it differently. That season was written as it unfolded, and no one was strong enough, or maybe even meant, to stop it. Back then, that's what I believed friendship was. Doing everything side by side, even the things that slowly broke us down. For me and many others, being high felt like laughter, like escape, like the only way to feel light for a little while. We thought that was what fun looked like. At home, I often felt unseen, mistreated, so being with people who carried the same kind of wounds gave me a false sense of safety. We recognized each other's pain without even speaking it, and that was enough to make me stay close. I never thought of substances as poison. To me, they were just part of the fun, part of survival, the only way I knew to feel free in a world that kept pressing me down. I remember staying with both of them, and the problems never seemed to end. Looking back, I know now it was the substances that planted most of those problems. They twisted us into versions of ourselves that weren't true, and we didn't even realize it. We spoke to each other harshly, cut each other with words, carried negativity like it was normal, and all the while we thought it was who we really were. But it wasn't. It was the drugs bending our reality, making enemies out of friends, making love feel like hate. We didn't know enough to see it then. We only knew the pain, and we thought it was on purpose. I'll never forget the trip I made to Texas to bring him and his wife back. Along the way, he opened up to me about the cruelty he faced in his own family. He told me how they left him out in the cold, how he moved from house to house, never rooted, never given stability. None of it was his fault, but they treated him like he was the problem. In truth, he carried struggles that no one ever tried to understand. His mind was blocked in ways that made life harder for him, and instead of patience, he was met with rejection. I could see he wanted better, for himself and for his wife. He dreamed of stability, but every time he tried to reach for it, new obstacles rose in his path. He wasn't broken. He was just a soul who needed more help to understand life than anyone ever gave him. This is future me, looking back with a conscience that sees clearer now. I realized my friend was someone who needed a different doorway into reality. His mind didn't process life the way others expected it to, and yet nobody took the time to understand him. To me, he was like a child still reaching for a map that was never given. What he needed was a community that could teach him in ways he could absorb, but instead, they failed him. I understand that pain too well. It's like when people speak to you in a language you know by sound, but not by soul. You catch the words, but not the weight. You repeat them, but they never root themselves in you. Without depth, you can't use that language to build a future. And that's what happened to him. He was left with words, but no bridge to reality. When I went to Texas, I managed to bring his wife back first. My mother told me her siblings could have done it, but still, I took half of my rent money and drove out of state. In my heart, I couldn't leave her there. No matter what his family thought of her, she didn't deserve the condition she was trapped in. She was young, vulnerable, and she deserved at least one person to show up for her. When I got to her, the first thing she wanted was to have her husband by her side. I wanted that too, but I couldn't. His mother's words echoed in my head, words that chilled me. If you ever go to Nebraska, you will return to me as a dead body." She spoke them in anger, but they carried the weight of a curse. I didn't want to risk all of us, so I left him behind that day, even though it broke me to do it. Her words terrified me. I was about to drive for hours, and I couldn't carry the weight of a curse spoken by his own mother. I kept replaying her voice in my head, and fear made me cautious. So in the end, I left him behind. Not because I didn't want him with us, but because I didn't want to risk all of our lives. But love has a way of finding its own path. He made his way back into town by himself, just to be with his wife again. That's how deeply he adored her. Yet from that point on, things began to unravel. The substances that tied us together were also tearing us apart. None of us truly understood how dangerous they were. We only knew the fights, the tension, the hurt, and we blamed each other, never realizing it was the drugs twisting us from within. My mother used to warn me, "That girl's mother doesn't like you. She thinks you're influencing her daughter. You should tell her to leave." And I listened, because I trusted my mother's words. I saw the changes happening, but I was too soft-spoken to make anyone understand. My voice was small, and when I needed it most, it failed me. The little courage I found came out as whispers. "Maybe you shouldn't stay here." But instead of hearing the concern behind it, she heard rejection. She thought I didn't want her around, when in reality I was only trying to shield her from harm. I wasn't pushing her away. I was trying to protect her. But my words were too weak, and they twisted in the air until they sounded like something I never meant. I tried to explain myself, but nobody truly heard me. The apartment was under my name, and every risk was tied to me. If anything went wrong, it would all come crashing down on my shoulders. I knew my mother was trying to protect me, but the weight of everything happening around me was already too much to carry. By then, I could feel myself slipping into addiction, even if I didn't want to admit it. Most days I knew it, deep down. Fear sat heavy on my chest. I was scared something terrible would happen to any of us, but fear wasn't strong enough to stop us. We kept getting high together, blind to how dangerous the substance really was. We didn't see it as death. We saw it as escape. There was one night that shook me awake. I saw someone sleep for more than 2 hours straight, and for a moment, I thought they might never open their eyes again. When they finally did, relief washed over me, but so did fear. From then on, I tried to control how much I took, but every dose carried the same thought. What if I don't wake up this time? Even with that fear inside me, I kept using. That's what addiction does. It binds you to the very thing you fear. I warned others, don't ever do this alone. I wanted to protect them because I knew how deadly it was, but deep down I couldn't protect myself. I was already trapped. There was one night when some friends and I got so high that I left a pot on the stove. By morning, the pot was blackened at the bottom, but the stove was off. We were alive, untouched. None of us knew how it had been turned off in time. I had no memory of smoke filling the room, but the neighbors did. My landlord later told me they complained about smoke and the fire alarm going off. I brushed it off back then, too lost to face how close we had come to tragedy. But deep down, I know it wasn't chance that saved us. We were all heavy under fentanyl's grip, and yet mercy still covered us. To this day, I believe an unseen hand spared us when our own choices could have cost us everything. I remember how my house became a place I never meant it to be. People kept coming over, even when I didn't want them there. I was too soft-spoken to stop it, too quiet to enforce my own boundaries. I would say, "I don't want anyone here tonight," but my words were brushed aside, and someone always showed up anyway. Before long, it looked like my home was a trap house, when in reality, it was just me being taken advantage of. Nobody saw how much it tore at me. On top of that, rumors began to spread, ugly things that didn't reflect who I was. It hurt deeply, because I knew people were judging me by a life I never chose, a life I never wanted. Many times, if someone slept over at my place, it wasn't because I wanted the company. It was because I wanted them safe. I knew my home was a safe space, and I would rather carry that burden than send someone out into danger. But the rest of what happened, the constant traffic, the noise, the chaos, none of that was ever my choice. It all happened against my will. I tried to speak up, but my words carried no weight. No one listened, no matter how many times I said it. Eventually, I just grew quiet. I let it all unfold around me, even though inside, I wanted nothing more than peace. As time went on, I began to see the truth of the drug. It wasn't just bad, it was deadly. Still, it was his thing, the escape he leaned on, and because of how close we all were, I found myself caught in that same rhythm with him. I begged him to stop, but he believed he could handle it. He trusted his tolerance, even when it betrayed him. There were times he would take more than one, and the way his body reacted would shake me to my core. It frightened everyone, but especially me, because I could see how thin the line was between life and death. There were a few days when it seemed like hope had finally touched us. He spoke about wanting children, about building a happy life. For a moment, I could see it in his eyes, that longing for something better, something pure. I was carrying my own struggles then, but for a short while, it felt like we were all reaching for change together. But that hope didn't last long. My job let him go because he didn't have the right documents. I will never forget the look on his face, the weight that came over him. He was crushed. Depression sank into him, heavy and deep, because all he wanted was the dignity of working and providing. We were all dragging ourselves toward better days, but for him, it was like every path forward collapsed, just as he tried to walk it. There was one moment that I believe stirred something deep inside him, a spark of change. It was about a month before he passed. We were high, and I looked at his wife and said, "You're acting strange. Are you pregnant?" The thought of it alone, just the possibility, brought joy to his face. He wanted so badly to be a father. That glimpse of fatherhood seemed to awaken a softer side of him. He said he wanted to be a better Muslim, to live differently. For a brief moment, hope was alive in him. I remember him telling me on Valentine's Day that he would get me a gift since I didn't have a man. The way he said it was thoughtful and gentle. It showed the kind of heart he carried, sweet, genuine, and full of kindness, even in the middle of the struggles that weighed on him. There was another incident that shook me to my core, something I believe altered my mind and spirit forever. He was driving that day. I sat beside him in the passenger seat, and his wife was in the back. It was about a month before he passed away. I leaned back and drifted into sleep, but what I entered was not a dream. Darkness surrounded me, and two figures stood there. One of them, I knew instantly, was the angel of death. I couldn't see him with my eyes, but my soul recognized him. The other stood beside him, unfamiliar and unspoken, a presence I could not name. Before I go on, I need to make it clear. This was not sleep paralysis. I've lived through that before, and I know its haunting grip. But this was different. This was not my body trapped in fear. This was my soul taken somewhere else, a place unlike anything I had ever felt or seen. The figure I knew to be the angel of death reached for me. His grip closed around where my throat should have been, though I had no body in that place. I felt it all the same, tight, suffocating, as if life itself was being pulled from me. I could barely breathe, and in that moment, I knew I was standing at the edge of something eternal. In the real world, I could hear their voices, him and his wife speaking softly in the car. But in the place my soul had been taken, I was suffocating. My cries filled the darkness. I begged the two figures to release me. More than that, I begged God. I pleaded, please, let me live. I don't want to die. I want to live. And then, with a force that felt like the heavens themselves answering me, I was thrown back into my body. I woke with a violent breath, lungs burning, chest heaving, panic racing through me. It was as if life itself had been handed back to me in that single inhale. I knew in my spirit this was not sleep paralysis. I've faced that before, and its grip is haunting. But this was different. Soon after waking up, the figures I saw felt familiar, almost like I had known them all along, like I was being reunited with them. When I woke, panic flooded me. I turned to him and his wife, my voice shaking as I told them, "There is another world beyond ours." I could hear you both in the car, but I was dying and couldn't speak. I was caught in between, the next world and this one. My soul could reach that place, but my body could not. I repeated it again and again, desperate for them to understand that I had touched something real, something beyond earth. I remember it as clear as day, how his eyes lit up with excitement. He turned to his wife and said, "Do you hear that? There is another world out there." His voice carried wonder, almost as if he had been waiting for someone to confirm what he already believed. Looking back now, I can't help but wonder if that moment was a sign written for him. For me, the experience left a heavy mark. Anxiety followed me in the days after. I told my mother what had happened, and she said softly, "Maybe the angel of death passed you by. Maybe you were given a taste of it." Those words stayed with me, a reminder that what I encountered was not just a dream, but a crossing into something real. Later, I often wondered if the angel of death had brushed past us in that car, if instead of taking him then, he spared all three of us, because only one was meant to go when the time came. In the days before his passing, I remember how his wife would sit with him and give him pep talks. She told him she didn't want him to become just a memory, that she needed him to rise above the path he was on. Her heart was sincere. She wanted the best for them both. She wanted everyone around her to find a better way. She was his backbone in so many ways, even though she herself was still young, still learning how to grow into her own womanhood and into her marriage. After losing his job, I watched him sink into a depression that seemed to consume him. Without the documents to keep working, the hope he once carried slipped away. I believe that's when he relapsed. During that time, the air between all of us grew tense. We argued, pulled away, and for reasons we didn't even understand, we could hardly stand each other. And then, suddenly, he was gone. His death shook everyone. I remember standing on the staircase of the apartment when the police gave us the news. They told us they had tried to revive him, but there was no luck. He was already gone. His wife broke down, crying uncontrollably, hysterical with grief. Her spirit seemed fractured in that moment. I didn't cry. My body reacted in a different way. Chills spread over me, leaving me hollow. It was as if my soul hadn't yet processed the truth, but my body already knew. I remember how the weight of blame was thrown onto her shoulders. His family pointed at her, saying it was her fault. But I knew it wasn't. None of it was. Even the choices she made weren't entirely her own. She had learned those patterns from walking beside him in his struggles. It broke me to see them turn on her like that. Instead of offering comfort, they poured judgment. They didn't see that she had been his backbone, the one who stayed by him through everything. And when the moment came, when he truly needed someone, no one was with him. He carried that final burden alone. I remember half the community gathering at my address, and inside I already knew what was coming. I knew how easily stories twisted, how quickly blame shifted. Part of me braced myself to be accused, as if I had done something, as if his death could be pinned on me. I stood on the sidelines watching people cry, and I couldn't stop my heart from judging them. Tears now, but where were they when he was alive? Where were they when he was just a broken young man in need of care? They never saw him as a person, never saw him as the child he still was inside. Instead, they stepped over his wounds until it was too late, and only then did they gather to mourn. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but my tears didn't come until weeks later. At first, it was like my brain refused to process the loss, as if holding it at a distance would protect me. I stayed away from his wife during her grieving stages, not out of indifference, but because I couldn't stand the people who hovered around her. It wasn't her I avoided. It was them, the same people who had spoken against her, who had gossiped and pointed fingers, and yet now pretended to wrap her in comfort. I couldn't stomach the hypocrisy, so I kept my distance. The people who now surrounded her were the very same ones who had torn her down while he was alive. They gossiped about her, called her names, judged her every step. They could have helped when the struggles were heavy, but they didn't. Instead, they pushed her out, scolded her, and poisoned her name with their words. And yet, after his death, I watched those same mouths speak comfort, those same arms reach out to hug her. Their sympathy rang hollow, because when he was alive, there had been no mercy, only whispers, only gossip. At the same time, I was drowning in my own struggles. I saw what was happening around her, but I couldn't bring myself to step into that circle. My absence wasn't about her. It was about the bitterness I felt toward the people who hovered around her, the same ones who had failed him in life. Still, they twisted my silence. They told her lies, that I was out partying, living carelessly, unconcerned with her grief. They painted me as if I didn't care at all. But that wasn't the truth. The truth was, I was grieving in my own way, carrying the weight quietly, while keeping myself away from the hypocrisy that surrounded her. I found myself on the sidelines, detached from everyone, weighed down by my own adversities. I moved through that time like both an observer and a participant, watching life unfold around me while quietly carrying my own traumas. And then came the chilling truth. The curse his mother had spoken over him came to pass. He returned to her as a dead body, just as she had declared in anger. That moment became a lesson etched in all of us, but especially for her. Words carry power, and the ones she released in wrath returned to her in reality. a sentence she may regret for the rest of her life. I don't regret keeping my distance during her grief. I believe we were meant to walk through it separately, each of us carrying lessons the other could not teach. That doesn't mean my heart was untouched by what she endured. I felt for her deeply. But I knew our journeys were written differently, and in time I became grateful for the lessons I was forced to face alone. In my solitude, though, I relapsed hard. The substances became my way of holding on to him. Every time I used, I felt his shadow there, as if I was keeping him alive in the only way I knew how. Secretly, I kept going back to it, because letting go of the drug felt too much like letting go of him. Months later, my own overdose came. My life slammed to a halt, and in that space, it felt like I had lived 1,000 lifetimes inside the walls of addiction. Time stretched. What was only months felt like a decade of being trapped in my own body. When I finally came down, I wept every single day. The weight on my conscience was unbearable, because unlike me, he never got the chance to rise again. He never got the chance to feel the air of freedom after chains. He never woke up. He never saw the life beyond the fog. And the thought of that tore me apart, because I carried a freedom he was denied. He never saw life with the clarity I was given, and that truth aches in me even now. From my eyes, and from the words he once confided, his family never gave him the tenderness he needed. Nobody held his wounds with care. They only shouted at him. They ridiculed him, as if his pain was his fault, as if his brokenness was a choice. And now he is gone. Accepting that absence has been one of the hardest lessons of my life, because I know all he ever needed was gentleness, and gentleness was the one thing he was denied. After his death, I would park my car and break down. Tears came because he deserved better than what life gave him. Tears came because he never had the chance to awaken, to see the beauty I later came to know. He left this world carrying nothing but struggle, and that tore at me. What cut me deepest was the hypocrisy. They only showed up when his body no longer moved, when his soul had already been taken by Allah. Only then did they cry. Only then did they feel sorrow. But where were they when he needed love? Where were they when he needed a community strong enough to hold him? If he had been given that, he might still be here. But instead they trampled over him until he slipped away. I don't carry blame for him in my heart. Instead, I see that I was meant to walk through certain burdens so that later I could bring light to them. If I had never tasted the weight of addiction, I would have never understood the hidden battles others are fighting. I would have never known the loneliness of wanting to let go of something, yet feeling your soul tied to it so tightly that escape seems impossible. Addiction tricks you into believing it is your only doorway into reality, even as it tears that reality apart. Living through that gave me the vision to speak on it, not from judgment, but from the rawness of survival. I tell this story because people are quick to judge what they've never lived. They look at someone suffering and say, just stop. Just do better. But they've never stood at the locked door of addiction, never fumbled for a key they weren't given, never felt the despair of not knowing how to do what everyone says you should. I also speak because our community failed. There was no plan, no path carved out for young adults like him who were drowning in cycles of pain. If even one person had truly seen his brokenness, sat with him, and walked him through the steps with patience and love, he could have been saved. He didn't need judgment, he needed guidance, and no one gave it to him. There were so many ways they could have helped him drift away from the substances. simple human ways that didn't cost money or demand rehab. I know because I found my way out without those things, and if I could, then it was possible for him too. But they didn't guide him. They pushed him out, claiming it was to teach him lessons, lessons he didn't need. Instead of healing him, they exposed his wounds further, pointing out his flaws without ever asking where the pain came from. What hurt me most was how they used even his faith against him. I believe they told him, over and over, "You're not a real Muslim. You're not good enough," until finally he believed them. He carried those words like chains, convincing himself that he was unworthy, that he wasn't a good Muslim, not a good person, and that he would never change. Those words broke something in him long before the drugs ever did. Through everything, his wife was the one who stood by him. She walked with him through the storms, shoulder to shoulder, trying to carve a path toward change. She became his backbone, even when her own strength was fragile. She knew him in ways no one else did. Wherever he was, she was too. She wanted more for him, better days, a life filled with peace instead of struggle. And in his infinite mercy, Allah did not take him without leaving a trace of hope behind. He left this world, but not without leaving an offspring, someone who will carry his bloodline forward, planting seeds of love and prosperity until the day of judgment.